Man, I already feel the electricity in the air. 2023 is set up already to be a really incredible year for the MMO player as we are nearing the release of many big MMORPGs that are on the horizon. And this video itself is going to talk about Throne and Liberty with a focus on comparing and contrasting a little bit of what Ashes of Creation has done, and I think there are some real interesting parallels between these games, and that's why I wanted to sit down and talk to you guys today about the big things that I feel that Throne and Liberty is delivering on, and some of these actually do also relate to what Ashes of Creation is delivering on. And if we count Ashes of Creation's Beta 2 as a part of the 2023 lineup, I think it's only fair to say that we're going to get more interesting data. I look at every launch, every announcement as a case study. MMORPGs are such an interesting genre within themselves that I think they're just fun to study and look at what is working and what isn't. So that's what this video is going to be about, but it's not just all my opinion. I always like to highlight your opinion and whenever I can. So we're going to be bringing in y'all's comments, what you guys are saying about Throne and Liberty, and we're going to talk about those here in this video as well. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video. Buckle up, hit that like button, and if you do, here's a picture of Tifa as a thank you so much for supporting this channel algorithmically. But anyway, all that being said and all that fun being had, we've got a lot to talk about, and let's just dive into it. So first things first, hopefully you have your teas or your coffees, because controller support coming to Throne and Liberty I think is one of the really big takeaways. The reason why I'm hoping you're drinking your coffee or tea is I know some of you hopefully did a spit take out there. I do not apologize. Controller player is absolutely massive for me as a player because that leans into accessibility. Now, one of the things that's often maybe misattributed to WoW or maybe not fully understood is that how World of Warcraft made MMORPGs really accessible. MMOs existed before WoW, but WoW came along with a history, with a nostalgia and an accessibility that had yet to be seen prior to it. And we might all romanticize, for me, Final Fantasy XI was that MMO, that first time experience, that game that I sunk so much time into, but that also supported controllers. WoW didn't, and it really actually limited my interest in playing World of Warcraft. So controller support has been and will continue to be an important feature because they announced this game for PC and console. Now, the question out there remains in internet land is, will this game support crossplay? And I think that if they're anywhere smart, that the answer is going to be yes. You cannot launch a game, a multiplayer game, in 2023 and beyond without that feature. Otherwise, people are just going to go back to what other games already offer that. Like when you think about your friend group, when you think about playing games with the people that are most important to you in your lives, if you have a game that you're all playing and you're already all are in cross-play, cross-save, and then all of a sudden a new game comes out, the hype will get you to check it out. But then all of a sudden you might find yourself easily stepping back into what makes it easy for you to play. Turns out you lost Dave. You know, Dave can no longer play your game. And so Dave is kind of out for a couple of weeks, and then ultimately you kind of miss Dave, right? So you go and you want to bring him back so it's easier. Gamers are in a way a path of least resistance. I think of gamers as lightning. Lightning will always follow the path of least resistance, and that's how it functions. And I see that same kind of pattern in gamers. Hopefully that's a compliment. We're like lightning, guys. We're shocking, powerful, all of a sudden, kind of aspects. So that's in and of itself. I think controller support will open up this game to many, many people. And the fact that it's going to be on consoles is going to be a real big perk. So if they can knock the cross-play, cross-save right out of the gate as well, you're going to be looking at a game, an MMO, a next generation MMO, mind you, that is really setting itself up well for the future. Now, this then ties into my second most interesting idea, or at least point that I feel like this game delivers on. It's free class system, giving us the ability to build our characters. I feel like everything's kind of been moving in this direction of safety in terms of this curated experience. And we don't want you to have to worry about grinding, or we don't want to have to worry about builds because we know that players are good. We know there's going to be a meta, right? I feel like a lot of people bow down and worship the meta when it really interestingly only impacts, I think, a small percentage of the population. Sure, people want to know how to be efficient, and I'm not saying that they're wrong. What I'm saying is that for the people who are really into it, fine-tuning and finding the most, perfect, optimal build, that's interesting information. the general gamer just doesn't care. Like, we're just here to have fun. Why I always try to focus, especially whenever I start my guides, if there's especially a build guide, I always like to start with the idea of find the fun, not the efficiency. Find the fun, not the efficiency. And that's usually, I would say, the majority of gamers out there. Yes, metas will exist. Yes, people will bow down and worship them. But ultimately, it's going to be up to you whether you want to choose to opt in and out of that. And if you're playing with friends, going back to point number 1, if you're playing with your friends, nobody really cares. We might just dog on you for being dog crap. But at the end of the day, that's kind of a part of the fun, in my opinion. Now we're going to go into my third most interesting point about this game. The visually stunning, the fact that it's built on Unreal Engine 5, and this is going to, I think, really help show off the game. This also is an interesting point to bring in Ashes of Creation at this point, because Ashes of Creation is also built on Unreal Engine 5. The fact that you're going to see these two big powerhouse games out there, both running the same, like development engine, is interesting. Like, will we ever see a who does it better? Well, that's going to be so much more about the aesthetics and the personal preference of the player. But this, from a technological perspective, I think is going to help these two games really excel themselves forward. And what I mean by this is I actually think about this more in the development life cycle. One of the things that when you're bringing in developers will come and go, but be able to bring in people and be able to pull from people with Unreal Engine experience will make training and onboarding so much easier down the road, and not just today, but tomorrow and the next day. So I think this is going to be definitely a strength that has in their corner. Where we talked about with the number 1 and number 2, well, number 1, we don't know if Ashes of Creation is going to support controllers, and number 2, when it comes to the free class system, we've already seen how they're starting to build out their class system. There's no strength or weakness in that. That's just going to come down to personal preference for your given class. Now, let's talk about the concern over the NCSoft being the publisher, because I actually think of this as a strength. I'm so happy to see that people have stated that they've been concerned that NCSoft is a publisher and they're not going to touch it. That is the lowering of expectations that I think benefits these games more often than not. What we end up seeing is a lot of hype. This is coming in, and I'm going to call out Narc on this one. I really, really hope that Ashes of Creation is an incredible game. I really want it to be everything that Narc wants it to be, because when he says that it's an MMO that is being built right, like, that is complete and total BS. Like, he does not know that for a fact. That sounds just like the echoing of a marketing campaign. I don't know any video game that's ever quote unquote built right. You can have things that are good, right? You can have an idea and you can have that aspect of support, but at some point Ashes has to release. And so if it took, like, as something he said that was like, if it takes another 10 years, oh boy, like, no, I don't think people are going to be willing to wait another 10 years for Ashes. It's going to be 10 years too late if it does that. Now, I get what he's trying to say in terms of that they want to make sure that everything is going right, that they don't feel pressure to rush because the publisher is threatening to cut out the funds. I think that's fine. So I'm going to definitely give Ashes of Creation points for that. But when it comes down to it, I actually am really thrilled to see people look at Throne and Liberty with a level of kind of concern, because we haven't heard a lot about it. This hasn't been a game that has been hyped up and talked about a lot. I think there's going to be a general set of fatigue that is going to be connected into it. And that's kind of my last point that I was going to make. The release for Throne and Liberty isn't light years away. It's 2023. They're targeting the first half. If it slips past that, at least if they hit 2023, I think that's kind of a win for them. Ashes of Creation Alpha 2 should be this year. Hopefully is this year. If it's not this year, I don't know what the Ashes of Creation community is going to do, but it's going to be an interesting year, I think, for both people. My hope is that Narc gets everything that he wants in this game. Otherwise, I'm not looking forward to that video, but his intros are top notch and over the top, which is always wonderful to watch. Now, going back into it, like getting into the nitty gritty, the fact of weathering effects, this is a kind of building off the Unreal Engine 5, the day-night cycle having an impact on these environments. Like, Throne of Liberty looks to be something outstanding. I've seen comments talking about, like, what does it do differently? That in and of itself could be just a general MMO RPG topic. But when I look at these two games specifically, I think they're doing a lot of things what you could define as differently, but in a way of kind of refining and building off of the things that have come. I think one of the things that is going to hurt both of these games is the expectation that you'll see another WoW moment that has happened. And the reality is I don't see another WoW moment happening again until we have some massive technological leap, until something that could never have been done before happens. And maybe that's VR, and maybe that's not VR. Like, we could see something along those lines. And I don't think either Ashes of Creation or Throne of Liberty are going to deliver on something that is so groundbreakingly new and exciting that it has never happened before, like in a way what World of Warcraft did many years ago. And because of that, you're not going to see those kind of moments. There's a lot of competition, a lot of things going on out in the world. And I think that it's going to hurt both of these games, because people are going to set the expectation that they're going to do what World of Warcraft did originally. Hype will drive up the numbers. And as with anything else, there are plenty of gamers out there who just love those hype cycles and just stick around for those and dip out. And so these are probably going to fall under the same structure of how everything falls into it. Now, all that being said, those are kind of the things that stand out to me, but for both games, and what I find interesting, especially about Throne of Liberty. But I want to jump into y'all's comments now, because this is going to be that part of the video, and I think it's important to share your thoughts on it. Brothers Crib says, I'm glad you're covering Throne of Liberty, Brian. Keep it up, brother. Thanks, Brothers Crib. And when it comes down to it, I'm really actually genuinely excited. From the original trailers and more, like, this has definitely been one of those games that it's like, I wonder, right? Like, that's where I'll go with it. Like, I wonder. Now, I was even asked privately, like, hey, well, why wouldn't I spin up my own personal channel for it? It's going to be how it feels, right? Throne of Liberty, it's going to all depend on how it feels for me. If I don't vibe with it, if I don't connect with it, I'm not going to sit here and just make content around it just for content's sake. Even if all of a sudden, like, everybody subscribed to the channel and was like, oh yeah, we love your Throne of Liberty coverage. If it doesn't vibe with me, I'm not going to stick with it. It's the rule for every game. I can't lie like that. It feels dishonest to be able to, like, sit here and say, hey, I'm going to cover this game because I'm getting the views, and then not necessarily play it or enjoy playing it. That's just not who I can be. And that's not why I like making videos. Like, I like to talk about what I'm excited about, and that's one of the reasons this video exists. So hopefully Throne of Liberty knocks it out of the park. There's not a red flag that I see. Not even NCSoft being the publisher is a red flag that I see. It will just matter on how it delivers, how it feels to play the game, and then ultimately, like, how they end up deciding to monetize it. Because if it feels overly predatory and pay to win, yeah, I don't want to spend my time and money there. But there's also a lot of really great games coming out this year too, and I am already just all excited, have been all in on Blue Protocol for a long time. New World continues to just amaze me, and I'm very much enjoying that game, and that's why those games have their own channels. But we'll see if Throne of Liberty really sets itself out to amaze. I'll let you guys know. I'll let you know if I do spin up that channel for it and for its coverage, because it just ends up working out a lot easier for the viewer. And that's how I see it. Like, if you guys like that coverage and you don't care for Ashes of coverage, or if you don't care for whatever coverage, well, then I'm not going to sit here and bombard you with things that you just don't care about. And that's kind of how that system came about. Now, Prieto says, oh, you killed your channel. Great job. Thank you. That's actually what I do around here. And you might think I'm joking, but it's actually true. That's what I have been working on for the last year. Now, killing the channel, not necessarily the end goal, but I do purges from time to time, namely because, like, you get these kind of trends that happen, you know, that take off and then they blow up, but it's not who I am. And so occasionally I like to make sure I do these purges to get people to unsub and make their way to go hopefully enjoy their lives, because they're not necessarily making my life any better for that. But I announced last year what I was doing as a part of my YouTube experiments, and that ties into the multi-channel approach, which I think is paying itself off in terms of just pure numbers alone. So when I sit down to make my how I broke the YouTube algorithm video, and you can too, I think that's going to be really insightful to show you guys exactly what the numbers, exactly what it looks like. So if you're interested in content creation, that in and of itself will be a very, very clear picture of how gamers think, how they respond to content, and how you can, structure your channels more so based off of me purposely trying to show you guys. So anyway, Reeve then follows it up, says, I think it has potential to be the biggest MMO release of 2023, but also the bar is pretty low. Other MMOs close to release are not that exciting, other than maybe Blue Protocol. And you could actually look at this year kind of as a Throne of Liberty and Blue Protocol release window. That's why I think it's important that Throne of Liberty drops in the first half of 2023. because we know globally the Blue Protocol will release in the second half of the year. Now, it's coming out in Japan in the spring, but essentially they're targeting the fall for Blue Protocol for the West. And I don't know if Amazon is publishing Throne of Liberty, but it is rumored that that's the case. And if that ends up also proving to be true, you could see that Amazon launching two of the biggest, most hyped MMOs out there is actually really important. And we can see what they've done with New World, and we've seen what they've done with Lost Ark. And so you know it's going to be an exciting and thrilling experience. Now, Dantos says there's a large population of people whose game is waiting for the next big game. The actual game doesn't matter. It's getting hyped for the next big thing. And I think that kind of highlights what we see with the people who just literally are all about following the hype, being excited for the new game, playing the new game, over consuming the new game, dropping the new game, getting excited for the next thing. There's really nothing wrong with it. In fact, I would say that's the majority of the industry. It's built off of chasing that high of the dopamine, that high of the hype. Hype is, like you'll hear me say, hype is a hell of a drug, man. People love it. And that's why when it comes down to it, you don't really need to reason with somebody who's hyped, because they're just not going to hear it, because you're just going to try to kill that buzz. It's somebody coming into the party and, warning you about, about a consumption or something like that. And you're like, oh man, what are you doing? But yeah, so hype is a hell of a drug. Just use hype responsibly, people. What it really drives me nuts personally is when you see somebody who gets hyped and then is confused by the withdrawal. Like, oh, what happened? And that just becomes something where it's like, yeah, you were hyped and now you're not hyped. And just wait, it'll come back around. Pure Extreme says, I hope that Throne of Liberty is the next big MMO and they bring something new to the table, because I'm tired of these other MMOs with the same type of grind that we keep getting every expansion. And yes, I'm talking to you, Final Fantasy XIV. And really, when it comes down to it, the type of grind is really kind of where I would like more information from Pure Extreme. Like, are you talking about the storied grind, or just going out and grinding on monsters, or the quest hub grind? One of the things that really is exciting about Pantheon is quests don't reward experience. And I don't think they should. I think experience should come from fighting monsters in the open world, but everything shifting into the quest model, that being the big hit, the big reward, and grinding on the mobs is less than. Yeah, I kind of find I find that that's kind of dull, because there's so much value you can put into the monster grinding, in my opinion. But that's also the old school player in me. Really, it just depends. I'd be kind of curious as to what they say. If Throne of Liberty is that traditional quest hub style kind of grind system, well, ultimately those roads end, and that's where people end up kind of running into this situation of you kind of have to wait, hurry up and wait in a way that people play MMOs. And I think that kind of leads to the frustration. Now, we got a big comment here from Dawn Warden. Says, hey, let's be honest about everything, Brian. There are a lot of factors when it comes to gaming that many creators have put little tidbits out there, like Lucky Ghost. I think he was putting it out there that the casuals and PvE players far outnumber PvP players, and that is absolutely true. I know there are a lot of these players in WoW, and I'm assuming Final Fantasy XIV. I mentioned this as a for-profit margin. There are a bunch of us on both sides of the divide that are waiting for a game that we'll get sucked into wholeheartedly, like we used to. I look back at my time in MMO type games, started with Lineage 2 before getting sucked into WoW, and I have seen games try to recapture that feeling, like WildStar and the hardcore raiding grinding scene, aka Raid Attunement. I think the most vocal people have been the PvPers overall, wanting a new game that caters to them. But when I look at a list of the MMOs, almost everyone on those games that were for PvPers died a brutal death or were sent into some sort of free-to-play pay-to-win hell. Crowfall seems to have died at launch. Camelot Unchained seems to be in limbo. ArcheAge 2 is on the way, but we're looking at least 2024 along with Ashes. I'd still put Ashes in 2025, just as kind of my mental math there. We'll see what ends up happening and shaking out. Now, some of these new games coming out seem to have a certain amount of gatekeeping to prevent them from being games for everyone. Some of these gatekeeping types have posted videos that are clearly not have watched a limited amount of the information that we have for TNL. From what I have heard, read, watched, this game is going to be interesting. Whether that means it's a good game or not, who knows? As NCSoft themselves look at the list of released games, it looks like there are 4 major releases of MMOs on PC in the Western market: Lineage 2, Aeon, Blade and Soul, and WildStar. Out of the 4, I played 3 of them at launch. They were typical sub-based MMOs. Blade and Soul 1, I have no idea what I was like at launch, and the other 3 at some point went free to play pay to win. So I'm hopeful that this will be similar with Throne of Liberty. The mobile game have been brutally pay to win though. If this March 1st date that Jay said that he heard is the potential release date, I doesn't leave much to get the game all of its ducks in a row. And I would say that if you're going to say March 1st, and that's what that's what, like, I'm scrolling up a little bit as I look at my script. Lucky Ghost sitting here saying that the March 1st, I would ultimately say that that could be a good beta date. That would be a fine and perfect beta date. Launching this game on March 1st right now, that puts a tight marketing budget in terms of, like, you got to also think of everything that's coming out in January and in February, with the fact like Destiny 2's latest expansion launching at the end of February. Like March 1st, it will end up being a very difficult date for gamers to get excited about. But then you start shifting that into April and to May, you start having a lot of bandwidth, a lot of people looking for a new game to play, and a lot of hype and excitement. So I would say you probably beta this in March, release it in May. That would be kind of my target. So if you're hearing any dates, we'll see. I'll let you guys know as that information comes be available. Now, Patrian says NCSoft is definitely never going to challenge the toxic pay to win aspects of MMOs because they are probably one of the earliest enablers of said monetization. I think really when it comes down to it, it comes down to economics, right? Like, it's unfortunate, and I don't know if Throne of Liberty will be pay to win or not, but it'll be labeled by pay. You know, people label things even if it's an overused term, pay to win. But when it comes down to it, is that I think it really is about economics. Like, what's the overall operating cost? How do you recoup your investment? How do you get enough money to maintain going forward? And is the player base big enough and supporting enough that the game can continue to evolve? Things like Warframe, I think, bring to mind an example of games that have continued to get community support. A good game, I think, will drive people into it. I think essentially what ends up happening is that you get investors nervous, and then you end up having to just try and recoup any amount of money out of there that you can. So we'll have to wait and see. I know they'll label, people are already labeling Blue Protocol play to win. Anytime if a game, especially if it's a free game, it can get that label. Personally speaking, I think buy to play, even without a sub, you can do Battle Pass and other things like that, end up being the strongest offering out there for players, because that just gives people a lot and gives that reoccurring revenue. What I think companies want, where we've seen them kind of mess up in the past, is without a subscription, there really hasn't been an option to take advantage of that. But now you kind of have the Battle Pass. And so if you think about it, a Battle Pass acts as a loose subscription, and it does then say, hey, you can come and you can start to have a predictive and predictable kind of cycle of revenue that ends up benefiting the developers and the game overall for players, where it also then is optional. So you don't feel like you don't get cut off from the game if you can't afford it for that time. We'll have to wait and see. But Eric does think this game is going to be pay to win. So we will see if Eric is right on that or not. That's the thing that's going for it. If it ends up not being pay to win, like if NCSoft releases this game and it's got the visuals, it's got the gameplay, it's got the controls, it's got everything, and then it's like, oh, it's actually got a decent monetization strategy, I think I think everybody wins. That's where you get a lot of excitement there. But the final comment I want to highlight here is from Kevin, saying the problem is that people are hyping their MMOs to be the next big revolutionary thing when the genre has basically stalled out for the last 10 years. When you set expectations that high, people will get disappointed, especially when you don't give the specifics, I suck at that word, that people need to satisfy their interest. They should be focusing on what makes their MMOs unique rather than pretending like it will change the landscape of the MMO forever. You can build an audience around it and cater to those tastes. Now, Throne of Liberty may look nice, but I'm seeing very little about what makes it stand out. I think that's what is a raid and plenty of PvP, but no HUD, no class specifics, etc. And that really is going to tie into, when you start to think about the release date, the cycle of information, right? Like from a marketing strategy, how do you get that information out? When do you release that information? And I think that's what you're going to start seeing kind of spin up more and more and more as we get into this year alone. I do not think March 1st will be a release date, but goodness gracious, if it ends up being a release date, that's going to be a pickle for me. Because, oh man, there's just too many good games to play that, and when it comes down to it, I'm hoping that ends up being kind of more of a whispered beta date, and then we end up seeing this game released closer to the summertime, because that would actually work better for my schedule. So maybe we'll see. But that means that you assume first half of this year. If you start assuming closer to the summertime, you really don't need to go full on specifics just yet. But we'll see. We'll see as that information rolls out. I'm going to be breaking it down because I generally am interested in it. I know Throne of Liberty looks great, and the fact is that it's got controller support and it's going to be on console. If they have that cross-play, cross-save, it's going to really open up the game to a lot of players, and I think that's going to be really important for its overall success. But that's going to wrap it up. Thanks, guys, for your comments. Hopefully you enjoyed my thoughts, especially as it relates to Ashes of Creation versus Throne of Liberty, and what we're going to end up seeing here. This is going to be a game that you can play this year. Ashes of Creation might be a game you can play as a part of the alpha. And we'll be keeping you guys up to date. It's going to be one heck of a good year for MMORPGs, at least if nothing else, to learn more about ourselves and the genre that we love. Anyway, guys, thanks for your time. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully I'll see you next time. But until then, take care.